Not me, but my brother. He was in and out of jail for a few months at a time for a number of reasons. Happy to say he's sober, out of a toxic relationship, and thriving now. But I remember the way he described the echo of screams and moans from the mentally ill people in the pitch black was so unnerving. It made me feel sad and terrified all in one, especially since the dark is one of my biggest fears. Probably seeing the lengths people will go to in order to get opiate replacement therapy like Boop or Suboxone, in order to either sell to someone else or because they're being intimidated to give their dosage to someone. Inmates have to swallow the liquid in front of a guard and nurse obviously, but they have figured out ways around this. Creating little paper catchments and sticking them in their throat, or just being empty-stomached and vomiting it up when they get back to their cells. Not in Brazil, but my dad used to work as prison guard, and once he saw an inmate get stabbed to death by a shiv made from sharpened toothbrush. Dude grind toothbrush little by little when he takes shower until it becomes sharp. Kettling is big in UK prisons. Mixing sugar and boiling water to make a napalm-like substance to throw or pour on people. Hands down though, the worst thing I personally saw was when I worked as a violence reduction buddy. I talked to a man in isolation who had sliced himself all over with a razor blade and was rubbing his shit into the cuts. Some of the behaviors from those suffering from mental health issues were pretty disturbing. Inmates covering themselves in fecal matter or smearing it all over their cell was not entirely uncommon. Saw an inmate cover himself head to toe and also bite wounds into his wrists and pack those with shit. One inmate cut a testicle out and slapped it against the cell window when the CO walked by. Legit crazy people who not faking but schizophrenic or something else wrong. Feel sorry for them cause other inmates will fuck them up. Dude sitting there rambling to himself every waking moment, and guards just let the nutcase and gen pop to irritate everyone until someone shuts him up. Lots of crazy people need to be somewhere else but gen pop. Oh, and I was in group therapy and this dude had a ball in his hand when talking, and I figured it was like something he got from commissary. Don't think much of it, then someone comes up to him holding a trash can. It was a ball of his own shit. Second night I was in, I heard officers screaming disengage over and over, and I looked at my cellie who had been down for 20 years for murder. What was going on? He told me that when they catch a couple of guys doing the deed they scream that to get them to stop. This same cellie started to growl like a dog at my foot while I was laying on the top bunk and then pretended to bite at my foot. When he did this, my toe went into his mouth, which caused him to gag. One time during count, these two guys started to make tattoo ink by burning baby oil, but they threw water onto it when it got too big and it spread all over their cell, so they were locked in the cell with flames covering the walls with them locked in it. They were about to get out in a couple of months but ended up getting a 10-year sentence for arson after the incident. Brazil. Once the lights went out, you'd start hearing scraping noises on the concrete. It was gang members sharpening their homemade knives on the concrete floor. Somebody was about to get killed when you heard that noise. Stuff straight out of hell. I was in county jail, but in a rough part of Southern California. We had triple stack bunk beds in general population and just a large, open room. I had a middle bunk, and oftentimes at night guys would try to stealthily jerk off. The bed shaking is a dead giveaway, and usually you just try to ignore it. Well, one night I'm reading and the bed started shaking vigorously, which is not how you do it. As I was putting my book down to tell this dude knock it off, he fell off his bunk and cracked his skull open on the concrete floor. He had a seizure on the top bunk and fell down about 7 feet straight to the concrete head first. That was a gnarly sight to see. I spent a few days in a holding cell. I wasn't eating, going to the bathroom, nor was I offered a shower the whole time. I couldn't pass my health exam due to a fever, so I was never moved to Gen Pop. The drunk asshole in the cell next to me screamed for, I swear, the entire 3 days he was in there. Swore up and down he wasn't drunk driving. I'm pretty sure this was very late into New Year's Eve night, and by the way the officer spoke to him, he was a regular. I couldn't sleep or focus on my book. My Crocs had 32 holes in them and my cell was 14.5 bricks long. I was imprisoned for a few months in Brixton Prison, London. My cell was at the end of the oldest wing of the prison, built in 1836. One night, in the early hours, I was awoken by a noise outside my cell. It was the noise of a guard walking by and sounded like he was banging his truncheon on the rails outside my door, like a kid does along a fence with a stick. It was really irritating, and I got out on my bunk and looked onto the landing through the porthole in my door, and to see which one of the assholes it was. I was surprised to see that there was nobody outside on the landing, though I could still hear the stick knocking. Next morning I mentioned this to some fellow prisoners, a couple of whom had also heard what I had. An officer nearby heard us and said, "Oh, that'll be old John up to his usual tricks." He went on to explain that old John was prison guard who loved to wake prisoners by banging his nightstick along the landing rails just to irritate them. Old John had been murdered by a prisoner in 1889. The officer went on to explain that when they hear Old John is about, they stay firmly in their landing office until the noise is finished. Not prison, but did a month in jail. My cellmate would steal the candy I bought from the commissary that I had hidden under my pillow when I was sleeping. I caught him once and we got into an argument. He threatened to rip off my head and shit down my throat. This same guy was also making pruno in our cell. When I found out about it, I told him to dump it out. He said he would / did. But he just packed soap around it and hid it to hide the smell. I dumped it out on him when he was in the shower. During this same stint, a guy from solitary was brought into our block. He got in an argument with his cellmate about who has top or bottom bunk. Solitary confinement guy was about 6 feet 3 inches. Other guy was about 5 feet 6 inches. Other guy had just come from the shower, so only had a towel on with wet feet. Solitary guy threw one punch and absolutely laid him out. There was also a guy that came into our block that smuggled in Suboxone in his prison wallet. He shit it out in the shower, which pissed a bunch of us off. When the guards found out, they started to take him out and he tried to make a run for it. I turned 21 in solitary confinement, was only put in for 2 weeks for passing contraband, fucking soups. The guy next to me had been in for months. The windows are frosted so you can't see outside into the world. The guards come by twice a day and point a taser at you while they tear your cell up. While you're naked. The screams at night from the guy in the cell next to me were so fucking heartbroken. It didn't sound human at all, just helplessness and sorrow. Sorry, I know you were looking for stories of fights and shankings, but the thing that disturbed me the most was listening to that man every night for those 2 weeks. Working in maintenance. I saw everything: inmates committing suicide, inmates getting bashed to death, officers having sex with inmates, officers having sex with other officers while on duty. Saw a female inmate being fisted like forearm sorta, a notorious pedo have boiling water thrown over him, guys putting the inner of a pen up their penis, co-worker had a used tampon hit him in the face, had a female inmate break free of 3 guards and rush me, had a male inmate sneak up behind me with a shiv, saw an inmate roundhouse a guard and knock him out, did intercept a drug ring by accident. By far the worst was seeing a muster/head count. They had them line up on the yard. 2 inmates were holding a guy up. Like arms around him like mates sort of thing. They finished the head count, the 2 inmates let go. He fell like a sack of potatoes. Ended up with massive brain injuries. Not me, but my aunt, who was convicted of a pretty serious white-collar crime, did time in a federal prison known for holding the worst of the worst violent female prisoners, which the popular TV series Orange is the New Black is based on. When she got out, all my cousins had a get-together at her place where she told us all her prison stories, and by far the craziest one was about a woman who was in there for killing and cooking her infant child, then feeding it to her husband for having an affair. This was jail, not prison, so sorry if this doesn't count, but when I was there for 3 days I came in with no shoes. I was bunked with S 400-pound very feminine man. First thing he said is, "Why you hiding your feet? You have beautiful feet." I would rub your feet all night. In theater of the night the dude asked me if I was masturbating more than a few times. I wasn't. He constantly hit on me and tried touching me. Last night I was there, he jerked off while I was asleep and carefully put his cum in my hair. I lost my shit on him and was moved till I went and saw the judge to get released. I spent 27 days in minimum security in Dubai before I was lifted by my country's consulate. It was surreal, seriously boring, except for when it wasn't. Minimum security was run by head inmates. Each wing had 2 chiefs. The wings weren't allowed to mix in general, but when I arrived they were on good behavior and the chiefs had negotiated having the wings joined, so it was like an open prison. On day 12 of my stay, someone from my wing was accused of stealing from the other wing, and all hell broke loose. The longer-term residents who had been chill were suddenly all over each other. The guy who was accused was basically being lynched, and had to be rescued. There was a massive brawl. People had weapons like broom handles and sharpened phone cards. Both wings got locked down. Some people got hospitalized. The fucked up part was the wing chiefs had to sort it out to satisfy the corrections officers. They reached a verdict that the accused person would be flogged, regardless of proving the allegations or not. Someone had to be punished. I don't know if the guy actually did anything or not, but 2 days later he was taken outside to the exercise yard and the other inmates whipped him with a cane until he passed out. Then the wings were opened up again, and everything went back to normal. That wasn't as bad though as being inside Bur Dubai police station. I was in there for 11 days waiting to be charged. Each wing of the station has 12 beds. It's not designed for holding people, but there were about 400 people in there. Some of them were on transfer from max to minimum security. Some were waiting for charges. It was a mix of creditors, drug addicts, murderers, with no classification or separation at all. One wing was strictly for Khaliji locals and nowhere near as populated. There was someone in that wing being raped every night. His screams would echo around the whole complex. I don't know how long he was in there for. Some people in that station had been there a long time. I spent nearly 12 years in prison in the state of Florida. From 18 to 29. I seen some whack-ass shit. From a guy they called the Jacksonville Rapist. He would cut the pockets out of his pants and tie strings to his dick and jack off in front of the gun towers at Okaloosa Sea. Then one time these two little greasy white boys got in a fight. They went at it for a couple minutes, and when they were done, there was a small turd laying on the floor. Neither of them would cop to it. Hysterical. Then I'll leave you with this. I came around the corner in a dorm at Cross City and I see a guy I had some respect for on all fours taking a country mile at BBC. I was like, whoa. Turned and headed a different direction. I catch up with homie later, and I'm like, WTF? What are you going through? He said he just wanted to feel what it was like. Those are just a couple.